And there'll be a few documents that are distributed after the session as well, with some crib sheets, some information, contact numbers, that kind of thing. So I'll hand over to Graham now, and he'll take you through the presentation.
Cheers, Chris, and hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the webinar today, which is entitled Cracking the Code, Cloud Frameworks Demystified. What we're going to do is run through a number of frameworks that are coming out this year in terms of cloud support and how you can access them and other bits of information. We're planning on doing follow-up webinars on specific ones and how to maximize your output, but we'll go through that as we go through the webinar. So a little bit about us to start with. So Thornton Lowe is an established bid writing company and consultancy based in Greater Manchester. We specialise in helping our clients grow business through frameworks and competitive tendering. The business has been running since 2009 and has a really strong success rate. This webinar is for anybody new to the cloud and IT frameworks. It's also companies that are already on those frameworks who are yet to win work from it. We know people go on to G-Cloud, they get their service definitions listed, but actually they don't transact. So we'll talk a little bit about that during the webinar. The aim is to give you an understanding of the key lucrative cloud frameworks in the public sector that are coming out this year, as well as some guidance on how Thornton Lowe can support you with your applications and maximisation of those opportunities. As Chris has said, if you've got any questions at any point during the webinar, pop them in the chat and we'll come to them at the Q&A session. As my mum says, there's no such thing as a silly question. If you're thinking it, then absolutely somebody else will. So pop the question in and then we'll get to them in the Q&A session. So before we go into the actual frameworks themselves, why frameworks? So frameworks are the easiest way to supply your goods and services into the public sector, and ultimately it gives you access to the opportunities. You've got pre-approval, so you're an approved supplier, which means you've already met certain standards and criteria, including answering technical specification questions, contract examples and other things, which makes the procurement process more streamlined. It gives you and the buyer legal protections because all of the frameworks come with agreements, terms and conditions, which offer legal protections to ensure compliance. There's efficiency and cost savings. So because you're on that list as a supplier, it reduces the time and cost associated with the tendering for individual contacts, which is beneficial for SMEs and smaller suppliers in the main. And then there's reputation and trust. So being on a government framework can enhance your reputation and credibility, showing that you meet ultimately the high standards that are required by public sector. As we go through the presentation, you may hear me talk about open frameworks or standard, different ones. And it's probably worth just pointing out that there is a new Procurement Act 2023, which is coming into effect on the 24th of February this year. And in there, it defines that there are 4 types of framework. So there's standard, open, dynamic markets and light touch. And on the screen, it just gives a brief description and key features of them. I'm not going to go through them specifically, but what I wanted to do was put a little bit of context. So when we say an open framework, then you understand what that might be. So the first framework that we're going to look at is the G-Cloud Alpha framework. It's expected to be launched in Q1 this year. Now, it was originally set for November 2024, but it's been delayed predominantly due to the procurement regulations. The framework is due to be a 3-year framework. We don't know the type, but we're expecting it to be open, but it's to be confirmed. And the estimated value over that duration is 3 billion. Now, this is a brand new framework to the market, and it'll operate, we believe, in a similar way to G-Cloud. The difference between G-Cloud Alpha and G-Cloud kind of 14-15 is that this will be a 3-year framework, whereas G-Cloud tends to refresh every 18 months. It gives range, it'll give you access to a range of diverse services across the cloud applications of the public sector. And we've listed there some of the infrastructure as a service and software as a service type products. There's nothing on there specifically about professional services, but we're still waiting for more information to come out. So if you are more of a professional services business than a SaaS or an infrastructure business, then don't worry, I think that will come, but we'll update as we get more information. There's only one planned procurement intake for the life of this framework. So when it's released, we'll have 4 or 5 weeks to do the submission, it'll get assessed and go through. people that buy from Yorkshire Procurement, YPO, ultimately it's predominantly education, local authorities, blue light, some central government. So it's a reach in and it's a good complement to the G Cloud framework. In terms of G Cloud, G Cloud 14 went live on the 31st of October last year, so it seems really strange to be talking about G Cloud 15 already. But because there's a long period of assessment, and I'll talk a little bit more in a second around the assessment and some changes that we've heard, it will be released around June, July this year. It's an open framework, and traditionally it's open for 18 months, but it could be extended to 24, and they're currently estimating that spend to be 4.8 billion. It'll replace directly the G Cloud 14 framework, which is live at the moment. Core services are infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and specialist cloud services, including professional services, migration and support. So there are a number of changes which Crown Commercial are talking around G Cloud 15. So the first one is that the lot structure has changed. So we've dropped from 4 lots to 3, with lots 4 being merged with lot 3 into the specialist cloud services. And as you'll see on the screen, lot 1 and lot 2 have been split into A and B. So lot 1A is for infrastructure and platform services with a focus on hyperscalers, and they're estimating to look at about 150 suppliers on that lot as a cap, with lot 1B being aimed at smaller providers doing similar type services. In 2A, it's software as a service to manage cloud infrastructure and services, and lot 2B, they reckon will be focused on other software services. And as I say, lot 3 is around specialist cloud services, including kind of cloud strategy, mitigation, support, and professional services. So that's the first change, is they're splitting the lots down and merging things through. The other change that they're talking around is the checking of the service definitions. So people put service definitions onto G Cloud that might be 2 or 3 iterations old, not necessarily compliant, and other elements. So the first thing they're talking around is how they're going to check the service definitions to make sure that people are relevant to be on that framework and to supply on that lot with the services that they're doing. G Cloud tends to be used as a more procurement kind of route and a way through. They want it to be a marketplace that transacts, but with the relevant products and services. So that's the first thing they're doing. They're also looking at the entry criteria and kind of what sits where and on what lot, and what the kind of compliance elements are. And we'll touch on some compliance elements in a bit. A lot of the mistakes that people make with G Cloud is the service definition itself, and making sure it covers the main kind of core elements that are needed on that. And what we're looking at doing in the next 4, 5, 6 weeks is putting on a webinar around how to maximize your service definitions and how to make the most out of getting onto that service. So G Cloud is due around June time. Again, it's operating a similar way, marketplace, but with a more refined lot structure and focus. So that will be in. So as we move on, we've got the NHS Shared Business Services Cloud Solutions 3. The current version runs out in April next year, so we expect the documentation, the ITT, to be released early Q4 this year. It's an expected 3-year duration with an estimated 1.5 billion spend. The focus of this framework is to make sure that the NHS can maintain and future-proof its cloud systems effectively. There's lots of talk in the government around improving waiting lists, how people interact with the NHS and work through, and a solid cloud platform and solution is absolutely where they need to be. So core services, infrastructure, platform and software as a service operating through. There is additional services of solution design and consultancy, which is assisting the organisation in implementing and planning those solutions. And there's the cloud support services, which are things like security monitoring and some professional services as well. The anticipated lot structure is over 4 lots, which is detailed on the screen. And what we'll do, we'll update the Thornton Lowe website. We'll tell you how to access that a little bit later on with the information on this as we get it. But this is going to be a key framework for NHS Shared Business Services as they go through the next 3 years and the NHS transformation, which is taking place. The last framework that we'll talk about is ultimately Cloud Compute 2. So this is another Crown commercial framework, and it's Cloud Compute 3, which is replacing Cloud Compute 2, that expires in November 2026. The ITT expected date is going to be around end of Q4 this year. We're expecting a 3-year duration, and the expected value, according to CCS, is 1.3 billion. Its framework is designed to give a more streamlined and compliant way to access a range of cloud services. So core services that they're offering are infrastructure and platform as a service. Again, additional services, value-added auxiliary services, which are enhancements to the core offering of infrastructure and platform. And then there's the professional services, so consultancy and support services to assist with cloud adoption, planning and optimization. It looks like it'll be over 4 lots, but we're doing the supplier engagement at the moment. And again, we'll update the website as that goes through. Cloud Compute 2 has had around about 800 million spent through it. So it's been a big spend, and they're looking at how that increases more. So again, it's another key framework for kind of people that are entering the public sector and want to provide those services in there. So to get onto a framework, you may or may not know that there's kind of compliance elements. And what we want to start to do, as well as informing you of those 4 frameworks, is to think around how you need to get ready for them. So the first area is insurances. So there's public liability, professional liability, employer's liability, and product liability insurance that may be required or will be required. So the minimum level normally for public and employer's liability is 5 million, but the framework documentation will specify what that is. And you generally have to have the level of cover in place by framework award. So when the framework's been marked, you've been awarded onto it, you have to send in all your documentation again and make sure everything's compliant, then you'll need to make sure that's in place. There's a number of standards and accreditations, predominantly ISO 9001, 14,001 and 27,001. Now, they may not want those. They may want some type of equivalent or evidence that you're working at that standard. So, don't rush out and get those accreditations. Wait for the paperwork to come through. But again, if it's something that's needed, it's what we can support with and help to get those equivalents in place. Industry kind of standard practices that everybody has Cyber Essentials. So it's a self-assessment tool for Cyber Essentials Basic, and you do that online. You fill in a form, send it off, it gets marked, and then you get a certificate which is valid for a year. If a framework requires Cyber Essentials Plus, then they come in and audit your Cyber Essentials Basic to make sure everything that you've said is being done. So if you just Google Cyber Essentials Basic, if you've not got it, then it'll bring up a number of people that can support with that and go through. Or you can drop us an email and we can guide you to the right people and support with that. Everybody will need a carbon reduction plan in line with the Public Procurement Notice 0621. So what that's aiming for is the net zero of 2050 in central government, and also I think it's 2045 in the NHS. It's the type of thing we can help you with. It's putting the baseline years down and how you're going to reduce your carbon footprint over a period of time. But again, it's something that's essential for entering public sector that you'll need. We'll need to look at kind of the past 3 years of audited accounts. And the reason for that is you need to have a financial viability risk assessment or financial standing assessment. Now, it's appreciated that if we go back 3 years, we were still in COVID, and some businesses struggled a little bit with turnover and other bits. And it's about understanding where your business has been and going through, but also if there's areas of concern, we can document and explain what those areas of concern are. So getting ahead, thinking about it and kind of looking at the financial viability with the accounts, we can get ready for the framework releases. All frameworks will need some type of technical ability certificate or contract examples. They can be from the public sector or they can be from the private sector, not an issue. You could have delivered them as a subcontractor. So if you've been delivering your services as a subcontractor into the public sector and you don't have that experience, you can use those as contract examples. But actually, they can come through into this, so then you can get your place on the framework, so you can deliver directly into the public sector under your name. Again, that's something we can support and help with and guide through and make sure that you meet those. And the final bit of compliance element is a social value policy and action plan. So people think social value policy is, well, we've given some money to charity and that's it. It's more than that. It's around how you're supporting the community, underserved groups. It can cover, there's 5 key areas that the government have identified, including health and well-being, employability, COVID-19 recovery, just to mention some. And it's around what you're doing kind of to support that, or you would do to support that if you awarded onto the framework. And it's around giving back. It used to be called social responsibility in the private sector, but it's social value here. And it's making sure you've got that policy and kind of an action plan in place on what you're doing and how you're doing it. Most people might go, oh, I don't do anything. You do, but you just don't realize that you're doing it. So it's up to us to kind of help kind of get you through. On top of this, there's checking your policies and procedures to make sure that they're kind of compliant and relevant for the public sector. So in terms of Thornton Lowe, we've got a number of ways that we can support you. So the first one is a full framework managed service. So it kind of covers a number of steps. So the first step is compliance evaluation and gap analysis, identifying policies and procedures and accreditations that might need to be implemented for that framework, doing some templated documents and guidance on how to meet the requirement. The second one is when the framework come out, it's a full submission management. So we manage the process from start to finish. We work with you as a team, with our team of bid writers, to make sure it's a compliant and high scoring bid. And then when the framework's awarded, it's about maximising that opportunity post-award to ensure that the framework is you've got your return on investment, that you're transacting. You know, we said people don't transact, but actually it's just to support you to transact and kind of signpost the best way to do things. We offer that, though, framework maximisation, sales and marketing guidance as a standalone offer. We've got our bid mentor program, which is a day a month where we'll work with you to look at how to get you bid ready. So you're on the framework, how you're going to do the mini competitions, what might you need to prepare for, how can you write, and other bits. And we've got a bid success program, which is a complete outsourced service, including ongoing bid writing and support to win contracts, frameworks, and it's a dedicated account management, and that kind of starts at 36 days consultancy for the year to kind of get you growing in that public sector. If you head over to the Thornton Lowe website, you can sign up for our tender pipeline. That gives you a number of searches a week that you can do in terms of what contracts are coming out in your area of expertise, and that's free to use. There is a paid service as well if you want to download, get more information, but ultimately that service is fantastic. In April, May this year, we'll be launching our bid library. So it's going to be a online repository of information, writing and other facilities that will do. There'll be lots of information coming on the website at thorntonlowe.com on that over the coming weeks and months. But again, that's another service we offer. If you have in-house bid teams or you want to improve your bid skills, we can do some bid training. So that's a service we do. If you've done your tender and you want it sparkling up with a bit of graphic design, we can do the design service. Or if you need help resourcing with recruitment, we can do that as well. For me, the framework managed submission service, if you're entering the framework space, is a fantastic service that will give you the compliance, the full managed submission and the framework maximisation. And the bid success program, if you're an established person in frameworks and want some support and growth, then that's great as well. If you're interested in any of those or you want any support, then you can email us. It's hello@thorntonlowe.com, and you can visit our website, which is thorntonlowe.com. Super. So we come to the question and answers. So Chris, are you going to pick the questions for us?
Yeah, will do. There's been monitoring these as we've been sort of going through, but starting from let's have a look. So yeah, Declan Ross Thomas has asked, do you know, and this might be one that we need to sort of have a look into a little bit later and get back to you, but you may well be able to sort of flesh this out a little bit, Graham. Do you know why YPO are launching this framework rather than just using the existing sort of G-Cloud structure that they've got?
So the only bit I can say is there was a paper written by the National Audit Office that said there should be limited numbers of frameworks of types that are on offer that compete, and there's not really a competing framework with G-Cloud. So my assumption is they're launching it to compete with G-Cloud, and sometimes their buyers are in different circles. But ultimately, that's the only thing I can say. But what we will do is we'll do some research to see if there's anything that says why they're releasing it. It was announced back in June last year that they were doing it, and we were all like, why would you compete with G-Cloud? Because that's the go-to place. But it's, I think, to do with kind of just an alternative too. But we can get some more information. We'll get it shared with the group.
Right. No, that's really good. And just to back that up as well, we will be doing a full sort of document on this Q&A section as well, typing that up, doing the questions that were asked and our answers for them. So if there's any additional content that we can add when we go back, we'll add that to that document as well. So next one would be, let's have a look. So Michael Gurner is just not so much a question. He's just mentioned in terms of the compliance and having a modern slavery statement in place as well. The threshold for that is quite high. Yeah, that's right.
It's a turnover of 36 million, and what we would so you have to declare on the standard questionnaire, the SQ, that you're a business that meets it or not. And what we tend to do, just for compliance reasons, is put a modern policy statement in, regardless of size, to say that it's checked. But ultimately, if your turnover is less than 36 million, then you don't need to comply with the modern slavery element at this moment.
Great. Yeah, I've just got back to Michael and basically said, yeah, we do agree with getting that in place before they meet the threshold. So essentially what you've just said then, that's great. So the next one would be Simon Leela's asked about accreditations and standards, and Cyber Essentials specifically. He said, well, most people will be familiar with 9001, 27001, 14001. Do we know if there's any sort of further things that are required for that in terms of Cyber Essentials Plus? How far do people need to get into it?
So Cyber Essentials Basic is what's generally required in 99% of all the procurement. There are some frameworks that are very, when I say technical, I think there's a Digital Workplace Solutions 2, which is an NHS Shared Business Framework, required Cyber Essentials Plus on award. So they'll tell you that for award, but you'd need basic on submission. So they'll tell you and give you time to complete and get that. But we would recommend everybody starting the journey on Cyber Essentials Basic. There's always a conflict with the awarding bodies around ISO 27001 and Cyber Essentials, because ISO 27001 is technically a greater certification, but they're asking specifically for Cyber Essentials, so we have to meet the requirement.
Okay, yeah, I mean, Simon's expanded on that a little bit now. He's just said that they already have Cyber Essentials Plus, but he was asking, do suppliers have to have 27001, 9001, 14001 as like a mandatory?
No, not as a mandatory. So it shouldn't be a barrier to entry into the market. And they may say it can be done before the first call off. They may say or equivalent. So it's about us supporting you to kind of get that quality manual in place and the processes to show that you're operating to that standard, but you don't necessarily need the certification. Superb.
Right. Simon's just got back to us now saying that that's addressed what he was looking for. So that's really good. Thank you. Finally, and again, this is just another prompt for anyone who's got any additional questions, just to get typing in that chat section now. We've been asked by Freya Roberts. Can you offer any advice on how we can encourage our existing customers in the public sector to reprocure via the framework rather than the previous bid process, basically?
So yeah, that's a whole world of enjoyment, isn't it? Doing lots of bids individually. So in essence, the new procurement regulations that are coming in on the 24th of February encourage people to procure via framework. So there's a route through to do that. And then that framework will specify different ways that people can call off. So people shouldn't be going directly and just running an individual procurement process. That procurement process should be coming out to people that are on the framework. And that's why frameworks are ultimately key to the kind of the future and the direction, because you'll need to be on a framework in the majority of cases to supply into the public sector. So ultimately, your customers shouldn't be putting a standalone tender out. They should be assigned into a pipeline through the framework, ideally. The other thing that is said on that, when a framework is announced, there should be an estimated spend against that. And that estimated spend should be a number of memorandum of understandings that are in place for reprocurement or new procurement. So if they say G-Cloud is worth 4.8 billion, they have a good idea that it's going to be near that spend. Whereas over the past few years, at times, they've said it's a £300 million framework and only 100 million has been spent on it. So a lot of it is about getting a pipeline built and procurement built through, but it'll take some time to for that to work through after the procurement regulations change. But frameworks are going to be the majority of the main route for procurement.
It's also just letting them know that it's going to save them a lot of time, money and effort to go through a framework that's already compliant and meets their needs, rather than running the full procurement process.
And I think the secret for here is getting them to procure through the framework you're on. So as you know, there is a supermarket of frameworks that are out there that people can procure through. That's why the National Audit Office is saying that the number really needs to reduce to make procurement more efficient. But actually, if you're on a framework, it's getting them through that they can go and procure through your framework, so it can be awarded. And ultimately, that's why G-Cloud is a fantastic framework, because it's direct award marketplace, so it can be done in that route.
Great. Now, I know Pete Briggs has asked if personally, if our services apply to frameworks in sort of Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. I've said that we, as Thornton Lowe, can, we do operate in those territories, but I think he's expanded since then and said if the frameworks we've discussed today, these cloud frameworks, are there any differences in those territories in Northern Ireland, Scotland, anything like that?
So all of these frameworks buyers can be anywhere in the United Kingdom. So they're applicable across all. Occasionally, the Scottish government may release a Scottish specific framework, or a Northern Ireland might release a Northern Ireland framework, or Welsh framework. But ultimately, it doesn't stop the buyers buying from these frameworks, so they can be bought all across the UK. In essence, that's the whole idea. And again, it comes down to those efficiencies and the cost savings and the best suppliers for the frameworks being in the right places. So there will be potentially some smaller frameworks in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, but the majority of spend will go through the bigger frameworks.
Superb. Right. No other questions in the chat at the moment, but unless anyone's frantically typing now, we'll give you a minute or so. But I think we will look at wrapping up shortly. As Graham said, there will be a number of documents which are distributed after this session. There'll be a recording or a link to the recording of the entire session if you do want to watch it back, and the recordings from the start as well. So I know there were a fair few people that joined maybe 5 minutes or so in. So if you do want to go back and watch anything that you've missed, then you can do that on the recording. There'll also be a link to the slides, to the slide deck, and also a bit of a crib sheet that we've put together from the Q&A, from additional information that we've got, and also links to our services and everything like that. So it was really good to have you all here, and hope I see you all on the next one.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys.